Real quick, if you feel like you don't really have a grip on marketing your practice, then come join me down at the Dental Marketing Summit. It's an all-day workshop that's focused specifically on dental marketing. It's a tight-knit group. There's only 50 seats available. They're just doctors. It's not going to be a lot of vendors and all this stuff. It's not a pitch fest. It's really just designed to get doctors in a room. Let's show them what's working and collaborate and help each other grow our practices. So I'm going to be one of the speakers down there. I'm going to be talking on Google Ads specifically, but we have a great lineup full of doctors and other marketers speaking to SEO, to internal marketing, patient referrals, culture. It's going to be awesome. Like I said, it's an all-day workshop. It's down in Del Mar in San Diego, sunny San Diego. It's going to be awesome. 50 spots available. Most of those are spoken for. I think we have about a dozen seats left. So if you're interested, let me know. I have a discount code that will save you some money, but it's not very expensive anyway. It's $179 and without the code. So it's really nominal because it's an all-day workshop. And even if you just get one new patient from us, you're basically paying for it. But it's going to do a whole lot more than that. I'm really, really excited for it because it's more hands-on application than anything else. And so let me know if you have any questions. And like I said, I do have a code available. We only have about a dozen spots left. Hit me up if you are interested, mark@markthackeray.com, and would love to get you over there. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Dental Marketing Secrets Podcast. I am your host, Mark Thackeray, and excited to have you here with me on episode number 93, how to Disney-fy your practice. Well, I haven't really totally settled on a title yet, but it will be something along those lines. And just because I've been thinking a lot about Disney in particular and the experience that they deliver to those that come. So if you haven't been to Disneyland or Disney World, it is such an interesting experience. If you go there with the attitude of, or just kind of looking at it with a business eye and seeing what they do to engineer a tremendous experience for all of their guests, it is a very eye-opening experience. So several years ago, my family went down to Disney World, and it was an emotional time for us actually, because our third daughter had cancer. And this was her Make-A-Wish trip through the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So it was a really, really, emotional time. We were kind of worn out with everything that had gone on leading up to that point. And spoiler alert, she is doing amazingly well now. She is still with us, and we never thought that would be the case. So it is a tremendous blessing for sure. And we've had so many miraculous experiences along the way. But so we go down, we have this trip down to Disney World. That's her Make-A-Wish trip. And it was phenomenal. It really was such a remarkable experience overall because of the way that we were treated. I think partially because they knew that she was part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation, but I also know that just even those times when we didn't have any identifying, shirt or badge or anything like that, the people would go out of their way to wow us in different ways. And I think that's the key there, is that it's part of their culture. And I have, it's funny because when I got back, I was talking about, people would ask about it, and I was sharing different experiences. And one of my friends had a similar experience down there. She was down there with a family. And one of the nights, they had fireworks, and she watched the fireworks, and they had a great time. And then the next day she got approached by one of the staff members, and how was your experience been so far? And they talked about seeing the fireworks last night and how fun it was, especially for the kids and all that. And she said, it was so cool. And where we were, it was great. And the only small issue was that, this one particular branch or this tree was in the way, and didn't think much of it. And then lo and behold, the next night they kind of found themselves, if I remember correctly, they found themselves at that same location, and that branch had been removed. And what a telling response to this guest's, comment. It wasn't that she was telling the employee, hey, this needs to be done. It was just an offhanded comment, really, about her experience. And this guest took it upon himself to go and act on that. It's not something that's written down in the job description, right? I mean, it's not saying, hey, you have to remove these limbs from trees that are, obstruct views and stuff like that. It was part of the culture that they'd built that, hey, if you see a problem and you can solve that, you have the license to do that. And certainly I'm sure there's guidelines and guardrails to make sure that you don't go overboard, expend the budget and all that stuff. And we don't want to take down trees and all that just because, but it's a great lesson in the power of creating a wow experience, because now what? How many times has she shared that with other people? How many times have I shared that with other people? And it just gets people talking. And that's really the basis of this shorter episode today, is just how to really make magic in your practice to the point where patients cannot help themselves when they speak to other people about your practice. They just can't help but talk about what you do and how amazing you are. And I think that's the first step right there, is looking at it from that point of view of, okay, we have our processes in place. Now let's get all the team involved, and everyone has license to make suggestions on how we can improve that process, how we can find those unique opportunities to make someone's day, to really show up in an unexpected way and produce a positive result. And I think that's the cool part about this, is that it makes it dynamic in that sense where there's no limitation really to what you can do. I mean, it's all up to you, and the more you think about it, the more you brainstorm, the more you discuss, the more it builds and accumulates. It's that snowball effect that it can have. And then you're sharing these opportunities, these ideas, and starting to implement some of them. You're getting feedback and iterating, and it's just this amazing positive feedback loop that runs through your practice and makes it something truly unique. You go from being, okay, we've got our dental clinical processes in place. We do those really well. But from a patient experience, it's just pretty much the same, unless you're a discerning patient possibly. But for most people on the surface, it's about the same, and that's where this can truly set you apart. Again, it comes back to creating this experience that people really want to talk about. They really want to share. And that's where you start to take advantage of the relationships you've built over years and years and years. Often, for a lot of practices, that's 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 patients that can now, if you're delivering that experience on a regular basis, that is monumental in terms of impact and what it can do for your referrals. So I think that's the first step, is just looking at it in that sense, thinking to yourself, how can we make some magic for our patients on an everyday basis? It does not have to be something massive. It does not require a huge financial investment. You could do some investment, right, to implement some improvements, but it doesn't have to be, and it's all about, as you're thinking about this, try and identify how to build an emotional connection with your patients. How can you do that? How can you deliver an experience that connects with them on an emotional level? Because that's what you want them to feel something different. And that's what it comes down to, is just what is that feeling that you deliver for patients? How do you make them feel when they come into your practice? That's what impacts patient retention. That's why they keep coming back, is the way you make them feel. They have so many options out there. It's ridiculous how many options patients have nowadays when it comes to finding a provider. And so how do you make them feel on a regular basis? And that's going to impact how long they stay with the practice, but also how often they speak about your practice to other people. So, examples could be anything from the very simple ones, where patient comes in, they might be nervous for their first visit, And instead of just a typical greeting, your desk knows their name in advance. Has done their homework for the day, looked at the schedule. You have record. Ideally, you'd have a picture so that you can recognize them easily as they walk into the walk through the front door. And it becomes, hey, Emma, we've been so excited to see you today. We have a special surprise for you after your visit. And that immediately eases that anxiety. If you know that they're a little bit nervous about this, it makes them feel like they belong. It adds to this identity that they're part of the family. We say that a lot. You see that a lot in, welcome to the dental family, or part of our, the Mark Thackeray dental family and stuff like that. But how do we really show that? And this is an easy way to do that is helping build that emotional connection. And a lot of that comes from, okay, so there's this, the outside perception of your practice, and then there's the inside reality of your practice. And it's so important to try to look at it in those two terms, because then you can try and bridge that gap and align those two so that it's congruent and there's no friction involved. When people come in and they hear, oh, this practice is amazingly high tech and it's super convenient and all these things, but when they come in and it's not that way, the inside reality doesn't match that outside perception, there's friction. And friction causes patients to question why they came into that practice and consider other options. So it's important to look at it that way as well. It's just, what are the impressions that we are delivering on a regular basis? What is that? You go back to the Disney example, front stage experience as they walk in. What are the sights, the sounds, the smells that patients experience when they walk into the office? How can we involve our team? How can we train our front desk to be welcoming and engaging, and find those opportunities to go out to really show that we want them, that they are part of the family, and looking at those small details that make a really big difference. Could be, practices. I know several practices that I work with, they bake cookies in their office, and deliver those cookies. There's that smell, one that has that experience. It's nostalgic for a lot of people because they remember growing up, and maybe, like me, we didn't always have cookies. So when I did smell those cookies, it was amazing, right? And there's that association, but it's also a gift. It's also, you're building this reciprocity. It's not expected. Personalized greetings are, more commonplace, but I think you can elevate that greeting to something different, so it's taking it to the next level, whether you acknowledge that they, something that you talked about last time in your conversation. Maybe they're running a race or preparing for a big trip to Europe or a child's graduation, just looking at your notes, doing your due diligence and looking at those conversations, and how can I weave those back in to show that I really do care about this person. I remember what we talked about. It's not just, hey, I'm not just passing the time, but I'm here for you, So additional examples that I could think of, soothing music, we talked about smell, either with cookies, or you can do some type of, aroma, lavender, vanilla, anything that's not typical dental office. You could see a welcome screen. Maybe you have a screen with their name on it that says, hey, Emma, you're here. We're so excited you're here. It just has their name on it. It's a little personalization that really wouldn't be too challenging, right? Offer them a drink, offer them, a magazine, a book, whatever the case may be. Just go out of your way to make that experience more memorable. Now, here's another one that I just have several different thoughts. So I apologize if I'm jumping around a little bit, but there's just all these things that came that I have down for how to make it a little bit more memorable and more magic in your practice. So anticipating patient needs before they even ask. And this comes down to how well do you understand your typical patient journey? And when I say journey, I mean for those that are new to the practice, to those that have been here for a while, and those that are, I've been here for a long time. Like, what does that look like? Or even based on, we mentioned if you have an anxious patient, what does that typical journey look like? Because that's going to be a little bit different than someone who's fine with going to the dentist. It's, you might have to create a few additional steps or some education or outreach on the anxious patient to help them feel comfortable than a normal person who's accepted the idea and believes in the value of regular care. So mapping out that journey, just like Disney does. I mean, they're so meticulous in this. They look at where people go, bathrooms. They look at how much garbage they're always monitoring that and making sure that there's not garbage on anywhere you go, and just to improve that journey, just improve that experience. So how can you do that, and how can you anticipate those needs before they even ask? And so it could be something like a welcome email that has. So one of the things that we can do is it's amazing with the technology we have. It's so neat how much information we can gain before humans even come into play, really. So we could send them a welcome email, and inside the email it has, it's got, again, we're trying to build that emotional connection. We're excited to see them, maybe a little bit about us, what to expect in the first appointment, and then possibly even having some resources down below to say, if you're feeling a little bit anxious, that's okay. That's very common. Click here to learn a little bit more on how to feel more comfortable when you get into the office. And it just has a link, and maybe it has a link to resources on your blog. It's a great chance to get them familiar with the blog and the website in general. So you get some good traffic there. But more importantly, that can actually trigger a tag or a notification to your front desk that says, hey, Mark clicked on being anxious a little bit about the appointment. And so that could trigger a note, that when you come in, then you try and anticipate that need, and just say, hey, sometimes patients feel a little anxious. You don't even necessarily need to call them out or specify that they are the ones that did that, and just say, hey, we have a lot of patients that feel a little bit anxious. Here are some things that I've put together for you in case you would like them, and it has whatever it has, it could have blanket or noise canceling headphones or essential oils or anything like that to make that experience that much better. But it's about preempting those requests or those needs or those concerns. And that's a pretty easy way to do that. Let's say in that email, going back to that, you have, anxious, or it could be, well, I don't have, it's hard for me to find the right time, or just trying to think out loud. There could be any number of things to anticipate, any number of questions or comments, or maybe it's insurance. And you could link to those, and each one that they clicked would create a tag, essentially, or a notification to your front desk that, hey, this is what they are interested in. So now you have all that data before going into it, and you can make that experience so much more relevant, so much more personalized to them. Really, really neat. And it doesn't take a whole lot. It just takes a little bit of forethought, and just thinking it out loud and talking with your team and saying, okay, what are those common questions that people have or concerns, and how can we address those? Next, creating these story moments in your practice. This is really kind of what we're talking about in general, but it's specifically in this regard. I want it to mean a little bit more. I don't want to confuse you, but it's more, how do we use the power of story in our practice? Certainly we want to create an experience that's story worthy, that people are telling people about. But in this specific point that I'm making now, it's utilizing the power of story throughout that patient appointment or experience to help them better understand the point you're trying to make. So an example could be, let's say you are in the treatment, you're doing a consult, and you're going through the treatment plan, and let's say they need veneers, or that's what you recommend, or Invisalign, or Invisalign's great. So they want to straighten their teeth. They've got some different issues, some bite issues, some gaps, and you want to help them understand that this is very common, that this is, or maybe they're anxious about it because they think it will hurt or whatever the reason. And you can use the power of a story from another patient to help ease their concerns, and just say, I totally understand. It's a little nerve-wracking to think, okay, I'm going to be undergoing treatment for 12 months, 16 months, whatever the case may be, and I'm limited in what I can do. Yes, they're clear aligners, and so you can remove them, but I do want to make sure I do this right, and just work through those concerns, and then share, another story from another patient. Let's say, and you want to try and find someone ideally that's about the same age, same gender, because they tend to relate better. There's lots of studies that show if you can you can show a case study that's very similar to the person that you're sending that case study to, then they're much more likely to act on that. And so you have these in your back pocket, these stories of specific examples that are similar, and just say, well, here, let me show you Diane's treatment. She came in, had very similar issues, and actually said some words that are not too far from what you just said, that they were a little anxious about undergoing treatment for that long. But one thing that she realized is that, yes, it is a long-term plan, and that's going to 12, 16 months. That's a good chunk of time. But in the grand scheme of things, then it's going to be all done. It's this one-time event to finally straighten her teeth and feel confident about her smile, not have to hide her smile ever again. And after she talked to a few other people that had done it, she realized that this is what she needs. She's been focusing on other people for far too long, and now it's her time, and it's been amazing to see the transformation. We're not even done with her treatment, and she is already so much more social. She's more engaging. She's more willing to speak up. So using the power of story to help them put themselves in that same setting. So having those, and it's just a matter of, okay, if I'm sharing this type of treatment, here are several stories I can show, based on if the person I'm sharing it to has these issues, or is this having these concerns. So just kind of almost creating a story catalog of sorts that you can pick and pull from depending on the situation. And that is great. And you can use those not just in consults, but also in emails, on your website, in videos. You can use those all the time because people love stories. They absolutely peak up when their head raises when people start to tell stories. Okay. All right. The next one is eliminating pain points and friction in the patient journey. So this is something that I alluded to in some of the earlier points, but how do you make that experience that you're giving patients seamless and stress-free? Is that in the check-in, check-out process? How can that be effortless? Is it being able to make it more convenient to schedule? They can call, they can text, they can go online, they can have a calendar that they can pick and pull from. Is it financing? How do you streamline access to care through proper financing and multiple avenues of financing? How do the follow-ups? How do you make this so easy for them that it's easy? It's harder to say no, where they're just, that's the goal really. So you just want to look at that whole journey and see where's the friction, where are people getting hung up? How can I smooth that out to make it more of a, I think of it as a slide, like a greased chute, a slide that's, that has good transitions. It's not bumpy or jerky or has these tight, weird angles that you bump up against. Have you ever been on those? Your kids probably have. They've had some weird slides out there nowadays where they're all I remember one not too long ago I took my daughter Annie to, and it's like it's on these right angles, it feels like, and they're like jerking back and forth, clunk, 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 all the way down, and it's just painful. It's not fun at all. It's not smooth, and it's herky-jerky. And you don't want your experience to feel like that, where it's nice and all of a sudden you hit this hard angle, and you bump up against it. And It just doesn't feel consistent or congruent with that experience that you're trying to deliver. So you look at that, look at it from a patient perspective and think, how can we make this step in the process smoother? Okay. This could be, like I said, it could be trying to minimize or simplify paperwork, check-in, calendaring, scheduling, text reminders, whatever the case may be. Okay. And then last, I have a couple other, but let's just stop with one more. Creating a culture of kindness and appreciation. I think one of the big things and the easiest things that you can do to improve referrals for your practice starts with this, is creating a culture of kindness and appreciation. These small gestures, whether they are a thank you note, a birthday card, a short video follow-up, hey, I know this was your first time in our practice, or I know you just had a lengthy procedure. I just wanted to reach out and see how you're doing. I know it can take a little bit. It takes its toll. So I just want to let you know I'm here for you. If you have questions, I'm thinking about you and just want to make sure that you're comfortable. Something like that, it can take 30 seconds, honestly, and it can go so far. It can extend that relationship so far. And you really, and so it's doing these things, but also celebrating other team members who go the extra mile, making that part of your regular meetings, your check-ins, and just highlighting those team members that come up with these ideas and then take action on them. You want to, because when you highlight those efforts, it reinforces that into your practice culture. Other people see it. They kind of intuitively want to receive that same recognition. And so they start to act like that. And what's so neat about all this is when you start doing this and all these other things, but it's when you show appreciation to patients, it turns them into lifelong raving fans of your practice. And that's the best. Again, it comes back to, how do you make people feel? And this is an easy way to do that, is through these small gestures. I've just been working with a few of my clients on these little note cards. They are nothing earth-shattering, mind-blowing. They're simple cards that basically convey the message that I like you. We really like you. That's it. Like, you don't have to say anything else. But again, it's that small gesture that goes a long way to showing how much you care and value their relationship. So simple things, get your team involved for this. But these are several different ways to help make magic in your practice, how to really Disney-fy your practice experience so that people want to talk to you. So they want to not talk to you. Well, they want to talk to you, but they want to talk about your practice. They want to share your practice with other people. They're eager to, they're happy to, they leave reviews, but they go beyond that and they start talking to their family and friends. And just because they're like, look at this, listen to this cool story, by my dentist of all people. And that's what we're trying to do, is just because we all have these patients that are more than willing to go to bat for us if we can help them feel that inclination. If we can just take it a little bit further in our relationship with them and encourage them to do that. And that's where the magic happens. So thanks again, you guys, for joining me today. If you have any questions, or if you have any comments on what you'd like to hear from, or I'd love to hear stories too, and your feedback on things that you've tried and implemented and have worked well, happy to share some of those success stories too. So just let me know. You can email me at Mark, M-A-R-K, at markthackeray.com, markthackeray.com. I'll put a link, a little note put that in the show notes, so you can just click on it, copy and paste, and shoot me a message. And if you haven't yet and have enjoyed the podcast, please leave me a review wherever you're listening to your podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts. I always say the wrong thing. Wherever you listen to this podcast, that would be a tremendous, tremendous help. But until next time, my friends, keep up the good work and keep on marketing your practice. And we'll talk to you soon.